Mr. Hefner to continue laying out his bill.
Scott Lopez. I have an amendment.
Following amendment. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Bryant.
Chair recognizes Mr. Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. An extreme risk protection order is an order sometimes associated with the term red flag laws, which are and have been for some time a means much advocated by people that take a reasonable approach to the use and possession of firearms to try to interdict a situation where people are at risk of harming themselves and others. It's very much like a domestic violence protection order. Indications in other states are that 2/3 of them are issued due to risk of suicide. And indications are in Connecticut and in Indiana that stronger enforcement through these extreme risk protection orders resulted in suicides dropping significantly in measurable percentages in both cases. For reasons that are very difficult to understand, this bill attempts to stop the enforcement of extreme risk protection orders issued by other states because Texas has no provision for extreme risk protection orders. No matter how much a person indicates a propensity and perhaps a growing propensity toward the use of firearms to carry out suicide or mass violence, no matter what the indications, we have no provision for interdicting that behavior and separating that person from their gun. We don't have that in Texas. So one would ask, well, then why do we have this bill before us? It's just another bill to try to flex our pro-gun muscles to make it look like we're doing something. What they're trying to do is to say it's going to be a crime for any one of our public officials to enforce a protective order issued to stop somebody who's close to suicide or close to a mass shooting, even if that order has been issued by another state. So New Mexico, which has extreme risk protection orders, could issue one against somebody who is threatening mass shootings, and that person could leave and drive 30 miles south into El Paso, and no one would recognize that order, buy a gun and carry out exactly the atrocity that he was prevented from carrying out in New Mexico. This is what's known as a bad old bill. It doesn't have any purpose. I'm really surprised that the majority wants to block up the calendar with this kind of legislation when more substantive bills are coming after it. The amendment that I've offered is an amendment to strike everything below the enacting clause and kill this bad old bill and move on to something that is substantive.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Reynolds, for what purpose?
would the gentleman yield for some questions?
Gentleman yield for questions. He yields for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Bryant, you talked about how red flag laws help reduce suicide. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it's my understanding from some research that red flag laws allow for the temporary removal of firearms from individuals deemed a significant risk to themselves, particularly in cases of suicidal ideation or behavior. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And are you aware that there is actually research that shows that there is a statistically significant decrease in firearm-related suicides in states with red flag laws. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of that. A reduction in suicide rates consistently shown up in the studies in those states.
So if we want to reduce suicides, then this is a step in the right direction. This is a guardrail or a tool in the toolbox to help reduce suicides. Is that not correct, Representative Bryant?
It would be if we could pass one, but we don't have one in Texas.
Are you also aware that red flag laws have been proven to help reduce the number of mass shootings?
Yes.
And so we know that just a few days ago, unfortunately, we had the anniversary of the shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, correct?
Correct.
Wouldn't you think that we as a state, even if we didn't pass the law to raise the age to purchase assault rifles, which I think you and I would believe that we should raise the age to 21, at least we could do was implement red flag laws after that tragedy. Would you agree with that?
I would certainly think it's almost inconceivable that we have not already done that. That kind of a law could have prevented the shooting in Uvalde.
Are you also aware, Representative Bryant, that an overwhelming majority from research that I've seen that law enforcement supports red flag laws?
Yes.
Do you believe that red flag laws infringe upon anyone's constitutional Second Amendment right to bear arms?
They don't infringe upon that right any more than they infringe upon a person's rights when you have to have a domestic violence related protective order or a mental health related protective order. It's just part of life, part of society. There should be no special treatment for guns.
Are you also aware that polls, meaning that there have been numerous polls that suggest broad public support for red flag laws, even among Republican gun owners?
That's correct.
And basically, we've stated so many compelling reasons that don't limit people's constitutional right to bear arms, that help reduce suicides, that help reduce mass shootings, that help keep guns out of people that could pose a harm to themselves or others. So why do you think that we are even debating not having red flag laws?
I don't know, particularly when the University of Houston's Hobby School of Public Affairs indicates that 88% of Texans, including 81% of Republicans, support extreme risk protective orders. This bill, which I'm hoping that we don't pass, would, before we ever get extreme risk protective orders, make it a crime to enforce them if they're issued in other states.
Representative Bryant, do you believe that one of the reasons could be that there is an over-reliance upon scorecards from the National Rifle Association?
No question about it.
And do you believe that we should put the interests of public safety in Texans before the special interests of profits in selling more guns and ammunition?
I certainly do, and I believe that we ought to take a holistic look at our country and our state and what our people need and be reasonable about it. I'm a gun owner. When I finish hunting, I put my guns in the closet. I don't spend all day long thinking about them or laying awake at night daydreaming about being a hero using those guns. I put them away. They're there if I need them for protection of my household or if I want to go hunting. This unreasonable approach to guns is causing mass murders and causing suicides.
Well, Representative Bryant, are you also aware that because they couldn't get comprehensive federal gun reform legislation passed, former President Biden did take a step in the right direction and utilized an executive order for red flag laws? Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of that.
And don't you believe that we as a state have a fiduciary responsibility to our constituents to do everything that we can to reduce the epidemic of gun violence in this state.
I do.
And red flag laws are certainly one of the tools in the toolbox that we could use, including raise the age, closing the gun show loophole. Are you aware of that?
I totally agree with that.
I think you have an excellent amendment. Thank you, Representative
Thank
Bryant.
you. This amendment would strike everything below the enacting clause and kill this bill. I urge you to vote for the amendment.
Mr. Hefner in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this strikes the enacting clause, so I'm going to ask you to vote this amendment down, straight up or down. Vote no.
Mr. Bryant.
Vote aye for what's reasonable. Let's move on. Let's get on down the calendar. Otherwise, we're going to be here a long time.
Question occurs on the Bryant amendment. It's a record vote. Clerk, ring the bell. Mr. Kane voting no. Mr. Hefner voting no. Mr. Hunter voting no. Mr. Metcalf voting no. Ms. Morales voting aye. Ms. Goodwin voting aye. Have all members voted? Ms. Kerwin voting no. Have all members voted? 56 ayes, 87 nays. The amendment fails to adopt. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Hefner.
Mr. Hefner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment I filed myself. It basically just clarifies that we're not doing something that we're not doing in the bill. I worked on this with the gun groups to make sure they were at least neutral with it. And so I ask you to vote with me, vote yes on this amendment to adopt it. Move adoption.
Mr. Hefner sends up amendments. A record vote. Clerk, ring the bell. Mr. Hefner voting aye. Patterson voting aye. Kane voting aye. Ms. Goodwin voting aye. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? 119 ayes, 16 nays. The amendment is adopted. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Goodwin.
Ms. Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment is about the provision in the bill that would take away federal grants. So federal grant funds are proven life-saving programs. Many federal grants support violence prevention, crisis intervention, and mental health services. The very programs that help communities reduce gun deaths and save lives. Refusing these funds limits Texas's ability to implement programs that are working across the country. Turning away funds harms local communities. Cities and counties, especially those hit hardest by gun violence, like parts of Houston, Dallas, and El Paso, rely on federal dollars to support community-based safety efforts. Prohibiting access to these grants takes tools and resources away from local governments and law enforcement. This would be fiscally irresponsible. Texas taxpayers already pay into the federal system. Refusing these grants means Texas funds programs in other states while getting nothing in return. That's not just harmful, it's fiscally wasteful. Local control should be respected. By denying the acceptance of federal grants, SB 1362 strips local jurisdictions of the right to decide what's best for their communities. Cities and counties should be able to access available resources to keep their residents safe without interference from state lawmakers imposing one-size-fits-all mandates. Blocking grants undermines public safety innovation. Federal grants help pilot innovative, evidence-based solutions from hospital violence intervention programs to community outreach teams. SB 1362's rejection of these funds stops Texas from participating in nationwide progress on gun violence prevention. This provision is politically motivated, not publicly supported. Most Texans across political lines, as you just heard Representative Bryant say, want practical, common sense safety solutions, not political grandstanding that blocks help. Stripping this provision focuses SB 1362 on real public safety concerns, not ideology. Removing the grant ban protects the most vulnerable. Communities of color, low-income neighborhoods, and areas with high gun death rates are often the intended beneficiaries of these federal grants. Cutting off funding to these areas perpetuates inequality and undermines statewide safety goals. With that, I move adoption.
Mr. Hefner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we worked on this bill for a while. We took the amendment that we believe gets the bill where it should be for the Senate to concur, and I ask you to vote with me to oppose this amendment.
Ms. Goodwin to close.
Members, by his argument, we should never change bills that come before us through the debates that we have back and forth when we think of things that might strengthen the bill or things that might make a bill better because they've already been heavily negotiated. That's what we're doing here right now, is looking at these bills and figuring out what makes sense for our communities and the state of Texas. And by saying that we're not going to take federal dollars, these federal grants that, again, help our hospitals with violence intervention programs is just not smart. So please vote with me to adopt this amendment.
Record vote on the Goodwin amendment. Clerk, ring the bell. Show Mr. Hefner voting no, Ms. Goodwin voting aye, Mr. Hunter voting no. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? 59 ayes, 84 nays. The amendment fails to adopt. Following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Goodwin.
Ms. Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. This particular amendment is regarding law enforcement initiated extreme risk protection orders. So my amendment exempts the extreme risk protection orders initiated by law enforcement officers. Notwithstanding any provision of the Act, nothing herein shall be construed to prohibit a peace officer, law enforcement agency, or prosecuting attorney from petitioning a court of competent jurisdiction for a temporary extreme risk protection order to prevent an individual from accessing firearms, provided that the petitioner presents clear and convincing evidence. And members, I'm reading this because this will tell you what an extreme risk protection order does. Now, granted, we don't have extreme risk protection order in law in Texas, but we do have protection orders. And so that you can understand what the difference is, the individual, again, would be prevented from accessing a firearm provided that, first of all, the petitioner presents clear and convincing evidence that the individual poses an imminent risk of harm to themselves or others. And again, members, this would go through due process. Oftentimes, the argument against extreme risk protective orders is that there is no due process, and that's simply not the case. So a petitioner would be going before a judge. Second of all, the petitioner includes sworn affidavits, incident reports, or other supporting documentation. 3, the court holds a hearing within 14 days of the issuance of a temporary order. Again, members, this is due process. This is going before a judge in a court. Number 4, the individual subject to the order has the right to counsel and to contest the order at the hearing. Members, what is this? It is due process. 5, any final order shall be limited in duration to no more than 6 months, subject to renewal upon further judicial review. Okay, did y'all hear that? It's not taking someone's gun away permanently. Says this order would be limited in duration to no more than 6 months. And finally, firearms surrendered under such an order shall be returned promptly upon expiration or termination of the order. Members, we should certainly be doing everything that we can to make sure our communities are safer. When you hear the argument that red flag laws don't allow for due process, that is simply false. I have just read you what the steps would be for an extreme risk protective order. With that, I move adoption.
Mr. Reynolds, for what purpose?
Would the gentlelady yield for a question?
Gentlelady for questions?
Yes, I will.
She yields for questions.
Representative Goodwin, I was listening to your amendment layout. I can tell you that last session I had a similar bill that was brought to me by my district attorney from Fort Bend County, Brian Middleton. Are you aware that there are district attorneys that believe that your amendment would be helpful?
Oh, absolutely. I think all across Texas they would agree with that.
And are you aware that based on the bill author's argument that we don't want to take away due process, your amendment gives due process, correct?
That's absolutely right. And like you, I have also filed bills in which we would be creating the framework for these types of orders so that we are giving people their due process and so that our district attorneys and our judges throughout the state would know how the process works.
And the long end of it is that this process is a temporary, potentially, removal of the gun from the hands of someone until they can make a determination, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I think all of us can think of situations where this could have been helpful. It could have prevented deaths.
And I'm no psychiatrist or psychologist, but there are certain times that an individual may be in a manic episode, correct?
Yes.
And those individuals, we may have medical documentation, and therefore that information is presented that there's a compelling reason why the firearm should be temporarily removed, correct?
Absolutely.
And don't you believe that these are reasonable limitations to help potentially reduce a potential mass shooting?
Yes, I absolutely believe that. And that's why I and you and other members have worked so hard to put in place extreme risk protective orders here in the state. In fact, after the shooting in Uvalde, Representative Jerry Patterson, who, I'm sorry, not representative, former Senator Jerry Patterson, former General Land Officer, Commissioner, was in one of the hearings that we held after Uvalde, and he actually suggested that we should pass an extreme risk protective order law here in Texas. And he is the one who I think was the original concealed carry bill author here in the legislature.
And Representative Goodwin, finally, in addition to district attorneys, I've also talked to law enforcement, because when I had this bill, I talked to law enforcement about extreme risk protective orders. And the law enforcement officers that I talked to, sheriff, constables, police officers, police chiefs, all of them have said that this is something that would help save lives, whether it's suicide, domestic violence, homicides. Are you aware of that?
Yes, you know, I believe in working with all the stakeholders, and that certainly includes our law enforcement. They're out there on the streets every day putting their own lives at risk. And when they see somebody that they say, wow, this person has given all the signs, all the indicators, the red flags that they are going to harm themselves or somebody else, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's incredibly frustrating, and it's putting their lives in jeopardy too.
And you just made my final point. So this is putting law enforcement's lives at risk as well as ordinary citizens. So basically, this is a pro-public safety amendment that you have filed. I think that is great. This is a common sense gun safety measure, and I hope that people will support your amendment. Thank you for filing it.
Thank you. You know, we always talk about backing the blue. Members, this would support our law enforcement and give them a tool in their tool belt to make sure people who are at risk of harming themselves or others, there's something that they can do about it. With that, I move adoption.
Mr. Hefner. Ms. Gonzalez sends up an amendment. It's a record vote. Clerk ring. Goodwin sends up an amendment. Record vote. Clerk ring the bell. Hefner voting no. Goodwin voting aye. Hunter voting no. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Bowers voting aye. Have all members voted? 56 ayes, 86 nays. The amendment fails to adopt. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Goodwin.
Ms. Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thank you for bearing with me. I know I have a number of amendments to this bill because I am strongly opposed to limiting our options when it comes to extreme risk protective orders. So this particular amendment simply says that we should empower our local communities. This amendment gives cities and counties the flexibility to protect their residents from gun violence, especially in situations where an individual poses an imminent risk while respecting local control and community needs. This would save lives with due process intact. Extreme risk protective orders have been shown to prevent suicides and mass shootings. This amendment allows local governments to use this life-saving tool with full due process protections, notice, hearing, judicial review, and the right to counsel. This protects Second Amendment rights. This is not about gun confiscation. The amendment clearly prohibits permanent removal of firearms without a separate criminal or mental health adjudication. Temporary orders must be based on sworn evidence and reviewed in court. This amendment targets imminent threats, not lawful gun owners. Extreme risk protective orders are narrowly tailored to address urgent threats of harm, like someone experiencing a mental health crisis or making violent threats, not law-abiding citizens exercising their rights. Members, we've had many situations where someone who is close to someone who becomes a mass shooter has seen those signs. Again, we need local problems and local solutions. We need local solutions to local problems. Gun violence doesn't look the same in every community. Local officials are best positioned to know when, how, and whether to implement extreme risk protective orders. This amendment preserves their ability to respond responsibly. It doesn't mandate extreme risk protective orders. It only permits them. This amendment doesn't force any municipality or county to implement extreme risk protective orders. It simply removes barriers for those who choose to act. ensuring local autonomy within constitutional bounds. Extreme risk protective orders do have bipartisan support. States across the political spectrum, including Florida, Indiana, and California, have adopted extreme risk protective orders. They are a proven constitutional approach to preventing gun tragedies. I move adoption.
Chair recognizes Mr. Hefner to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this basically does exactly what we're trying to prevent with the bill, so I respectfully ask you to vote no on the amendment.
Ms. Goodwin sends up an amendment. The amendment is not acceptable. The record vote has been requested. The clerk will read the bill. Show Mr. Hefner voting nay, Ms. Goodwin voting aye. Ms. Gonzalez of Dallas voting aye. Show Mr. Hunter of Corpus Christi voting nay. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? There being 57 ayes, 83 nays, the amendment fails to adopt. Following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Goodwin.
The chair recognizes Ms. Goodwin to explain her amendment.
Members, this amendment makes the bill contingent upon raise the age legislation. Uvalde demands action, not symbolism. This amendment honors the lives lost at Robb Elementary by tying SB 1362's enactment to meaningful gun safety reform, specifically raising the legal age for purchasing semi-automatic rifles to 21. Anything less fails to meet the moment. Public safety must be the priority. The amendment ensures that SB 1362 does not move forward unless the legislature first addresses the clear and present danger posed by easy access to high-powered firearms by minors. This is a reasonable, targeted measure. The amendment includes narrowly tailored exceptions for military service members, law enforcement, and supervised youth involved in lawful hunting or shooting sports. This is not a blanket restriction. It's a balanced policy with public support. Broad public support for raising the age. Polls consistently show that a strong majority of Texans, including gun owners, support raising the minimum age to purchase assault-style weapons to 21. This amendment aligns with the will of the people.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Morales, for what purpose?
will the gentlelady yield for some
Lady, yield
questions?
for questions.
Yes, I will.
Lady yields.
Representative Goodwin, I really appreciate your amendment. So basically what you're saying is that if we're going to pass this bill, it should be on the contingency that we raise the age to 21 to purchase assault-style weapons?
That's correct.
Because it has been 3 years since 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered at Robb Elementary. Is that correct?
That is correct. And, you know, the families of the victims of the Uvalde children and the 2 teachers came to the Capitol repeatedly last session, hoping that they would get a hearing, hoping that their bill would come to the floor. And then this session, I feel like the hope has run out for them. But I hope that if they are watching, they understand that there are many of us on this House floor who really want to do something to help them, and that would be to raise the age to buy semi-automatic weapons to 21.
Did you realize that the dad, Brett Cross, was here just the other day? I'll give it to you in just a minute.
Yes, I actually...
The dad, Brett Cross, was here just the other day, and he He was out here. I'm sorry.
It's very loud, Mr.
I'm
Speaker.
talking. Mr. Speaker,
For what purpose?
I'm trying to speak, but
Generally yield for questions.
okay. Ms. Goodwin,
Generally yield for questions.
Mr. Speaker, does the gentlelady yield for questions?
Generally,
Yes.
she yields for
Okay.
questions.
Thank you. Representative Goodwin, are you aware that Brett Cross, the dad of Uzziah Garcia, was here?
Yes, I saw him in the lobby.
Yes, he continues to come here to the Capitol. And also, are you aware that the moms from Uvalde were also here? I ran into them in the hallway. Did you get to speak with them? They brought pictures of their children.
I don't think I saw him the same day, but I have seen them here in Austin. I know that with the Lives Robbed organization, they've actually been doing some community awareness programs, and so I have been able to see them.
I appreciate this amendment so much because those families continue to come here, drive 5 hours, and I know you've been with us when we drove last session to Uvalde to honor the anniversary, and it was really heartbreaking, and we haven't done anything to address the children and folks who continue to be victims of gun violence.
That's right. That's right. And it's heartbreaking. I can hear the emotion in your voice. It is very emotional. It's well past time. It's ironic that when there is a mass shooting, people will say this is not the time to try to talk about policy. And now that there hasn't been one within recent days, again, it doesn't seem to be the right time. When is the right time? When is the right time for Texas to really have some good gun safety, gun violence prevention legislation passed here in the state?
Ms. Goodwin, wouldn't you agree that raising the age to 21 isn't just about good policy, it's about decency?
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I move adoption.
Mr. Hefner in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I respectfully oppose this amendment. Please join me in voting no.
It's a good one to close.
Members, for the Uvalde families, please vote with me and accept this amendment. I move adoption.
Record vote on the Goodwin amendment. Clerk, ring the bell. Show Mr. Hefner voting no, Ms. Gonzalez of Dallas voting aye, Ms. Goodwin voting aye, Ms. Isaac voting no. Have all members voted? Ms. Jones voting aye. Have all members voted? Have all members? Guerin voting no. Have all members voted? 57 ayes, 85 nays. Amendment fails to adopt. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.